What's up, friends? Thought of the day number 19. I wanted to give a few thoughts on fat oxidation, glycolysis, and mitochondrial mass. Sorry, I haven't made much content in English recently. The last month and a half, I've been extremely busy. I've been traveling a substantial amount to give some seminars across France. Everything is going really well, so I'm really happy. But that also means I had a little bit less time to dedicate to online content. And as much as, again, I'm trying to do as much as I can, both in French and in English. Time sometimes just is not sufficient. But since I've been reading in English the last few days, and so obviously my mind is in that space, I thought, hey, I would give a quick update on what I'm up to right now. So I've been very interested in Motter's model of metabolism for the last few, I'd say, weeks. I first came across some bribes of it a little bit longer ago, but really I came back and focused on it more recently. Remember that all models are wrong, but some are useful. I've seen this model be applied in a practical sense and yield very, very useful information. So I'm trying to understand it so that I can apply it in my practice. And so today I reread, I'm partly and 3/4 of the way through rereading one of Alois Motter's paper from 2002. I'm going to try and get the title right. I think it's Glycolysis and Oxidative Phosphorylation as a function of cytosolic phosphorylation state and power output of the muscle cell. I believe that's the title. I read it like 3 times before I started driving so that I could try and remember the title. And a couple things kind of stuck out this time. I'm becoming, like I mentioned on Twitter recently, I'm pretty keen these days on when I'm trying to understand a model or a concept that is foreign to me. The first pass when you read something new, like trying to understand and grasp everything is a lost cause. So just read the first time through, try to grasp on a couple things that make sense to you, and then go away, read something else, and come back to it. And I've been rereading Brooks's exercise physiology textbook, and that's been really helpful. And I found something in there that kind of answered one of the questions that I had, and it was kind of the interplay between glycolysis and fat oxidation. And how do those things how do they tangle together? Because obviously at that level of metabolism, everything functions together, and trying to understand how those things were, turned on, turned off, to speak very simply. It wasn't clear in my mind how it worked, but I found a sentence in Brooks's book that really made sense. And now going back to Motter's paper, everything is a little bit clearer. So I think what stood out, or at least what I understood, and then maybe I'm wrong, and you can tell me what you think or what is correct in the comments. But one thing that I grasped is obviously the activation of different pathways is going to be predicated primarily on, as the title of this paper says, the phosphorylation state of the cytosol of the cell. So essentially inside the cell, depending on it's not the only thing that matters, but to speak simply, the ATP to ADP ratio. So out of the ATP pool, how much is in ATP form, how much has been hydrolyzed into ADP form, and that is going to trigger different metabolic cascades in order to replenish that ATP pool. That's really what's going on. The body's trying to get back to homeostasis, and so it's going to use different strategies to do so. So obviously you've got the creatine phosphate buffer, and then you've got oxidative phosphorylation, and you have, well, at the top of that you have glycolysis as well. That's going to play into it, and fat oxidation. So you have all those things that play in together. And one thing that I grasp is that essentially, if I understand it correctly, and I don't have all the details correct, so maybe what I say doesn't make 100% sense. That's why I'm trying to formulate it clearly. If you have more mitochondrial mass, if you have more mitochondrial capacity, volume density, whatever terminology you want to use, if you have more mitochondria in your muscle cells, then for a given oxygen consumption level, or rate, for a given rate of oxygen consumption, you'll be operating at a higher ATP to ADP ratio. Okay, so if you have more if you have more mitochondria, then for a given oxygen consumption level, you will have more ATP relative to ADP inside the cytosol of the cell. And that ratio is one of the things that's going to directly influence glycolysis activation, right? It's ADP is one of the triggers for phosphofructokinase, and then PFK is one of the rate limiting steps and triggers of glycolysis, as I understand it anyway. And so if you have more mitochondria, you're going to have more ATP than ADP compared to someone that has less mitochondria. And so you might not have the same level of activation of glycolysis, right? So for a given oxygen consumption level, you'll activate glycolysis less if you have more mitochondria. And then the gap, the non, that's not the right terminology, but whatever glycolysis hasn't been activated by that, ATP, and there's also inorganic phosphates that play a role into that. But whatever hasn't been filled up by breakdown of glucose or glycogen will then be supplied by fat oxidation, right? So it now makes sense why in one of Inigo San Milan's great papers, where he looks at different substrate utilizations and fat oxidation lactate curves for sedentary, or I guess metabolically diseased people, and then recreationally active, and then pro cyclists. This is why you don't necessarily see fat oxidation happen. One of the arguments was that, well, maybe they didn't start power output in those cycling trials low enough to see fat oxidation for metabolically sick people. And I was kind of in that bandwagon of saying, well, yeah, but if they started at even 70 watts for someone who's out of shape, that might be, 1 watt per kilo, but that's relatively high for someone who's completely out of shape. But what I see in my testing, and what I understand now from all that data, is that, well, it doesn't matter how low you start. Some people just don't have enough mitochondrial capacity to have that high ATP to ADP ratio while they're consuming larger amounts of oxygen for exercise and to sustain a given power output, even if it's a very low power output. And as such, there's not going to be any fat oxidation, or very, very little fat oxidation by those folks, simply because they have so little mitochondrial capacity that they're going to operate at a fairly low ATP to ADP ratio for a given oxygen consumption level. And so it's going to preferentially activate glycolysis, and then using sugars, and then obviously producing lactate, and then that lactate gets reutilized by the mitochondria itself. We know that to be a fact, that lactate gets oxidized inside the mitochondria directly. And there is no room, quote unquote, for fat oxidation. And I thought that was a very interesting way of conceptualizing it, of seeing it. And again, it seems that this is how it actually works. Again, I don't know if what I'm saying is correct, but this is what I understand. And I thought I would try and articulate it and share it to see if it made sense to you. So I love to hear your comments. I can try and link the paper if somebody is interested. Just shoot me a comment below, and I'll tag the paper in there, so you can go and read it if you want. You have to, yeah, you have to strap yourself in. It's not an easy read at all. There's a lot of heavy equations and math and assumptions in the first part. And again, I'm not saying it's correct. I'm just saying it's very interesting, and I've seen it be applied and work in practice, no matter how complex it looks. But yeah, I thought that was a fascinating, for me, that was a fascinating insight. So here I am sharing it. Let me know what you think. Leave me a comment below if you like this English content. leave me a comment so you can tell me what you'd like to hear about next. If you like those little recaps of things that I've read or things that I'm interested in, I can keep doing those. Anyway, always fun to exchange with you and read your comments. So hope you're well. Hope you're doing well. Oh yeah, look out on Monday. I've got an article coming out on Simply Faster, outlining my whole testing methodology. Or at least I tried to make it as clear as I could to explain kind of my approach for those who are interested. Thanks to Nathan and Simply Faster for featuring my article. So again, coming out this coming Monday. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.